Hey, good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, whatever. Welcome to SportWorks Talk. And we're glad today to welcome Sarah Crumbach. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Philippe.
And Creesen Naicker from South Africa. Hey, Creesen.
Hello.
Good news is we're going to travel today. We're going to virtually travel to South Africa. Thank you very much for hosting us in South Africa, Creesen. You are a social entrepreneur and co-founder of Sportstec, and you're leading the Homeground Learning Center. You'll tell us all about this in the next few minutes. So thank you very much for joining us. We met in Lausanne a year ago, and I was very impressed with your initiative, the methodology. So we can't wait to hear from this magic mix between sports, education, more particularly literacy, and also the beauty of digital technology and how it can help boost impact. And Sarah, we were lucky to work together on 3 editions of the Youth Olympic Games. So you are an expert in event management, but also a researcher, and you've partnered with these guys in South Africa to look at their model and contribute to it as well. So thank you very much for joining us. So I'm just going to hand over to you guys, but please, everyone who joined us, don't hesitate to say hi in the chat and use the chat to ask some questions. We'll get back to some of these questions at the end of the presentation, and we'll give Sarah and Creesen about 20 minutes to introduce Homeground Learning Center. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Philippe. So yeah, very briefly, the title today of our presentation is Community Development Through Sport and Technology, an integrated approach to rural development in South Africa. So before we dig into what exactly we're doing there and how we do it and how we use sport and technology, I just wanted to quickly tell everyone a little bit about Creesen and myself, who we are and how we met and how we got to work on this project together. So basically, Creesen and I, we met more than 10 years ago, 11 years ago, while we were doing the FIFA Master together. We got along very well, and we also did our final project together on women's football, together with UEFA, and we were part of a group that basically did a very interesting project on women's club football, something that I am personally very passionate about. I'm a football player and a coach. And Creesen, although he is a cricket player, he does have a soft spot for football and for women's football in particular. And as it was the year of the South African World Cup, he said, okay, let's do something about football. And yeah, that's basically how we met and how we got to find out that we had a lot of similar passions about how to use sport to change the world, to make the world a better place. And yeah, we said, let's do something together. And a few years later, a few years down the road, I was working in the Youth Olympics. Creesen invited me to come to South Africa. I was there on a business trip, and he said, why don't you come and look at this project together that I've built with my friend from Sportstec? And I said, sure, why not? And he took me on a long drive. He got off the highway. It was basically the middle of nowhere at the end of the dirt road. And I thought, where the hell is he taking me? But we ended up in a small town called Philippe, which is really a magical place. And that's what we want to introduce to you today is Philippe and the Homeground project. So before we start, we just want to give you a little bit of a global context. Because when we talk about sport for development, obviously that can have many, many different shapes. And what we wanted to focus on today is basically education and inequalities. So from a global perspective, 80% of the world's teenagers are not moving enough. They're not physically active enough, which is a big challenge everywhere in terms of health issues, physical and also mental health issues. And especially during these pandemic times, this is a big problem that is basically existing worldwide. On the other hand, when we talk about education, again, we have 600 million children in the world today that will not learn how to read. And this year, the 2020 pandemic could make that even worse, because schools are closed down in many different countries, and many kids and their parents don't have the ability to teach children at home. This means they're stuck at home and they won't be able to learn how to read. And the problem is that once you miss that golden age, it's very difficult to catch up. So this is the global context, and now Creesen will tell you a little bit about the South African context and about Homeground.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Great introduction. So as many of you may know, South Africa is one of the most unequal countries in the world, regularly featuring at the top of the Gini coefficients between Brazil and us. We regularly fighting it out for gross inequality to be a mantle we're really not proud of. And so that plays out in many aspects of society and life. One of them being the fact that we excel at elite sports, cricket, rugby, current rugby world champions, having hosted the World Cup in football, and across football, rugby, and cricket, and regularly quite competitive on the African continent. And our Premier League in football is by far the richest and most alluring league on the continent. Yet only 10% of our kids in our schools actually have regular access to physical education and school sport. So that it's quite a contrast. By the same token, we have some incredible private schools in terms of academic results, but then at the age of 10, only 22% of South African children can read for meaning, which is essentially about grade 3. So reaching grade level in a very basic skill of literacy, which is the gateway to pretty much all other content in your schooling career, provides quite a big barrier in terms of who gets to participate in the mainstream economy of South Africa. So let me talk a little bit more about sort of what is Homeground. So SportStec is a sports development agency in South Africa, sports development organization, which I co-founded with a friend of mine, Michael Flockhart. And about 15 years ago, we were traveling through the mountainous area in South Africa and came across this little place called Philippe. And we ended up meeting an incredible young man who's, well, we were all young at the time, but named Sifiso. And he's from the local community, and he was the captain of the football team there. And he kind of, got to know us through our regular visits. And we ended up supporting the football team. And that was the genesis of this project. We took the sport for development material, we came up with SportStec, and basically enabled Sifiso to use it in his community. From there, we moved on to realizing that it's all good and well to use sport for development, the power of teaming, life skills, but if kids are not getting the right basis for their education, we kind of leading them down towards a cliff edge. Because once they have to participate in mainstream South Africa, they're now essentially excluded through the fact that the schooling is not of the standard that they would need. So what we started to do was work more and more on how do we integrate sports and technology to support the young people in the community, and using the power of technology in education, where we couldn't get highly skilled individuals to come and teach the children necessarily. We built this project. I mentioned Sifiso as sort of the genesis of the project, or part of the genesis of the project. My colleague Michael Flockhart from SportStec, who currently still is the executive director of SportStec, he's provided so much of the support to the project. But both Michael and myself cannot be there all the time due to our work commitments. So while Philippe mentioned that I sort of co-founded and helped to manage this in some way, I have to say the one thing I learned from the MBA that I studied was that MBA stands for Management by Absence. So I've never been available enough, and Sifiso is the one who's really driven this project. I think there's a little video that would be really cool for us to show. So I'll let that play.
in the morning when he wakes up, they say, "Coach, could we go to school now? I'm late. I want to go and play."
Thank you. So a little bit more detail of what actually happened, or what we're actually doing. We set up this early childhood development center, which is essentially a kindergarten, because there was no sort of kindergarten facilities for children in the community. So they went straight to sort of grade 1 at school, or grade 0, as we call it in South Africa. And so that vital early childhood development wasn't in place. So we set that up, procured a facility that we could do this at. And then set it up so that children would come through in the afternoons from school to a youth center and participate in both physical activity, games, team building, as well as educational programs, particularly focused on literacy and numeracy. Two very important metrics in South Africa that are very lacking in our rural communities. And then we also have a program where from the Homeground Learning Center, we have an outreach to 5 schools. So every weekday, Philippe goes to one of the schools and operates a program there in the mornings. So that's, there's a lot more detail into the actual programmatic piece of this puzzle that comes from Sportstec as a development organization. And of course, there's a lot more detail that comes in terms of how to use technology for education and how to use devices in households to supplement learning outside of the formal schooling environment that comes from curious learning. So this is where we kind of brought together, these two different worlds. Sarah will go into a bit more detail of what's been achieved and the methodology. So I'll hand over back to her.
So before I go really into the methodology, I just wanted to also mention what we, and I include myself now in the team of Sportstec and the Homeground team, what we have achieved over the last, 15 years, but which is quite a lot. First of all, I think it's something very basic. Just providing access to regular sport and physical education is already something that makes an impact, especially when we see the numbers that Creesen mentioned, that not many kids have that privilege, unfortunately, or that right. And through the program and through the programming and the Sports to Life methodology, we've really enhanced the kids' confidence, awareness, decision-making skills, because it's really about developing the personality of the child and the child in the community. One big piece of the puzzle is that academic performance has improved a lot. not only have we basically put into the community the importance of education, so also with parents and with the whole community, the awareness that education is an important part, but also through the through the technology and the support we're giving at the center, the literacy levels have improved really dramatically. And when I say dramatically, I mean in an underserved rural community like Luxembourg, children don't really learn English until they go to school, and it's very difficult for them to learn how to read, first of all in their own language, which is Zulu in their case, and then English later on. So they have a double challenge actually. So through the literacy program and the homework help, we've done some tests over 2019, and basically by the end of grade 3, 100% of the kids that came to the learning center was able to read in their home language, so that's isiZulu, and they had very good results in English, their second language as well, which was really outstanding. Of course, we can't really define it is because of the tablet or because of the help with the homework or because of this. This is something where we still need to work a little bit further on, but the indicator is quite incredible when you see the schools that that have very, very low resources, fantastic teachers, but that have sometimes not even enough school books for everyone. So just considering the circumstances, I think this is something we're especially proud of, and the teachers and coaches and parents are all involved in this success, I would say, and reducing number of school dropouts, obviously. Sofiso and the other coaches have really become role models in the community, and the teenagers and young people that attend the program, they're also growing to become leaders within the community and positive role models. So basically through the methodology, we've empowered the local population, and they're taking all of this on board and they're implementing it. So it's just been a really great collaboration over the last 15 years, which has gradually been built up. So the methodology, very briefly, I think there's a lot of components to it, but what we want to just point out is, on the one hand, we have the Sport to Life, which is what Sportstec has been developing over the last decades, which is the part that we started out with. The second part is the culture and community, which is super important, just because any methodology that comes from outside needs to be embraced by the community. Otherwise, it will not function and it will not work. And thirdly, as Creesen mentioned already, the technology aspect basically allowed the coaches and gave the coaches some additional tools to supplement education. It's not replacing education by any means, but it's just a help to support teachers, to support coaches, and to support the kids in their learning process. So just to very briefly mention what Sport to Life is. Sport to Life is a philosophy, basically, that through play and sport, kids will learn something about life. For example, there are different themes, for example, like use your voice, come to play, or build your team. And as you can see in the pictures, there will always be a sporting activity that will be based on one of the themes. For example, build your team, which is focused on teamwork. And then at the end of the sports session, the coaches will make a circle with the kids, and they will discuss how build your team can apply in your daily life, whether it's in school, whether it's with your friends, or whether it's with your family, to find team members in your life that are good for you, that are positive for you, and who will help you to achieve your goals. So every activity is really planned, focused, and connected to something in the kids' real life. And this is why it's so important to have the local coaches, because obviously they know the circumstances, they know the context, and therefore they're the ones that facilitate and bring the whole methodology to life. The piece of the puzzle that came a bit later and that Creesen had a very big role in was the education technology part. So there's an American NGO called Curious Learning, and they are developing education technology applications specifically for early literacy. And there are different games. One of them is Feed the Monster, that are available in many languages, home languages, which is really important for kids, for them to be able to learn how to read. And basically, kids play, as you can see in the pictures. They play on the tablets. They're feeding the monster different letters and words. It's fun for the kids, and they're learning how to spell and how to read and pronounce things in their home language in a very playful and joyful way. And the third part, again, is the culture and community. All of this would be very difficult and almost not possible without the community. So we're doing regular workshops with parents. The coaches are involved on the school boards. We're doing a lot of things that are really bringing the community together to further enhance the relationships, and to make sure that this is a process where everyone is involved. So we can have feedback, we can discuss how things are done, and make sure that everyone is on board with what's happening at the Learning Center. And last but not least, we really believe that the key to success is people. So here in this picture, we can see Safiso in the middle. He's the head coach. He's basically managing all the operations, and he's a local community member who is doing everything, from morning till afternoon, and he's connecting the dots. So he's the one who will influence the kids directly, him and his team, consisting of several full-time staff and volunteers. They will be the ones who are implementing the project. However, we really believe that it's also very important to bring in external experts, because we want to keep investing in this community. So the external experts, whether it's on physical education, on health, on marketing, on business, on all these different aspects, they come in and they look at the program, they give us feedback, they will give training to the local coaches and educators so that they can also keep developing, and this will ultimately benefit the children and the kids in the community. So honestly, we think we have a great formula here. And when I came to Philippe the first time in 2017, I was really blown away. And I told Creesen, you have to tell this story. We have to tell this story to more people. And since then, I think so many people have come to Philippe, and I haven't met anyone who hasn't been super impressed with what's going on here. In this picture next to Safiso, you can see someone from the Buenos Aires Youth Olympic Games. Actually one of the sports managers. So some people from the Youth Olympic Games actually came to Philippe in 2019 to be part of this experience, to spend a week, to also provide their expertise and their feedback on the program. And this is exactly what we want to achieve, is basically bringing together different worlds, whether it's sport and technology, whether it's local context and global context, because we believe that everyone will benefit from what we're doing there. And we started with some global challenges, and we think we've found some local solutions. It doesn't mean that this is a solution to everything and to everyone's context, but what we've been trying to do in this case in Philippe with Homeground is, support learners in rural communities through sport technology, create a hub for capacity building where people can learn from each other. It goes both ways. We want to build bridges across communities that are often still segregated, and create opportunities for learning and growing for everyone that is involved. And the last point, we also really wanted to point out the partnership for the goals, which is goal 17. We really think bringing together different levels of organizations and different types of organizations is really beneficial. For example, Curious Learning, the American NGO, They've been amazing, but we also, we work with other partners, private and public, that are really involved in helping us to, always grow and improve the project. So yeah, this is our presentation, and I would say, Philippe and the rest of you guys out there, if you have any questions, please shoot. Looking forward to answering.
Fantastic, very inspiring. Thank you very much, Creesen and Sarah. I'm particularly impressed with the outcomes and the numbers you guys are sharing with us. I've met and talked and researched a number of sports for development organizations, and your numbers are staggering. Now, of course, there's probably more work needed over the coming years to come up with more detail regarding the causality and the mix between sports activities and the use of digital technology to really look at the best possible combination and mix of these two, and using maybe control groups. But I'm sure you guys will come up with even more solid statistics and evidence. But looking at the current situation, Creesen, maybe I have two questions before we take some questions from the audience. But the first one that comes to my mind is the relationship you have with the Ministry of Education and maybe other ministries in South Africa. Because when you look at these numbers, you think, why wouldn't the government embrace that methodology and support it across the entire nation? Yeah. Basically, you seem to be generating so much social capital in the form of increased life prospects and employability potentially in the longer term. So what does it take for the government to take over to recognize that value? And finally, yesterday I was sharing with Sarah some amazing work from Dr. Heckman, who got the Nobel in economy a few years back. He looked at early childhood investments. Investing in early childhood makes so much sense in economic terms for a nation. So where are you in terms of recognition and support from the government from a financial point of view as well?
Yeah, thank you, Philippe. So, governments, departments of education, even multilateral organizations like UN agencies, they follow very important but bureaucratic procedures before people do things, right? And I think we can understand why. Whereas, a sort of a dynamic young organization just doing whatever makes sense and getting sort of cohesion around a small group in a community can do things very quickly. We went from having this idea about technology to having tablets and mobile devices for all the coaches, who then use that to share into family homes, because there is device proliferation into all the households. So while there's not electricity and there's not connectivity, they could use their own device to transfer the apps into homes all over the community. Those kind of things just happen. We're talking in the matter of months, we could put that together and have it happen. So, we totally understand why things wouldn't happen as quickly and why these numbers can be staggering, because you just come across the right thing and make it happen quickly, and it will take government time to kind of follow up with that. And that's partly why Sarah's role was so important over 2018 and 2019, because now we were saying, how do we create the research base against this? Our numbers are too small for statistical significance, but anecdotally we can get some really sort of compelling evidence to this does kind of work. So yeah, that's I haven't answered your question directly, but I've just given you a little bit of the context around it. In terms of government support, two things have happened in the last 5 years that's really exciting. One is, obviously we were using a private facility to run the ECD center. The local municipality has recognized that this is something that has to happen. The community is now part of saying, well, it's the right of our children to go to these facilities, and you can't put it 25 kilometers away. That's not service delivery. So the government's actually built an ECD center. They've allocated resources for the staff member for this center. What we were doing was essentially using a couple of rooms as a youth center. Now the government's built a community hall, which is also part of the service delivery. So they are getting on board in terms of following through on the promises that they make many of our communities, now that they know the resources will be used and and supported, and of course taken care of as well. So those have been real big strides. Unfortunately, when it comes to decisions made from a government/political level, you can see these facilities, right? They're physical manifestations of someone doing their job right. Whereas a lot more of the subtlety that goes behind, coaches and in family homes, you don't always see that, and there's a longer lag time on where the ECD really works, right? Because these kids, you invest in them now, and your return is in 10 to 15 years. And so, I think as the research will support over time, I see more and more support.
Great, exciting. We can only wish for you guys. I see we get a question on COVID, and I wanted to get to that. So thank you, Alejandro. Two questions around the Corona crisis. First of all, how did you react and how did you adapt your different activities on the field to the new reality? And also, how did you manage to continue to support your coaches and the whole team? And more generally speaking, what is the impact of this crisis situation over the entire project in terms of sustainability and funding? Because obviously in the community of sports for development, we see a lot of organizations at risk and really wondering where the resources will come from in the near future. So where do you stand in terms of adapting your business case, or maybe the diversification of funding, and also going into social business and having some of your own revenue generated as well?
Yeah.
So that's many questions in one. Thanks.
Yeah, a couple of things in there. I hope I'll cover most of them. So responding to the coronavirus and the COVID-19 situation, South Africa went into a hard lockdown in about March. And we continued for probably about 3 months, where there was very limited scope for any activity, right, and any sort of movement. So that was quite a difficult period in terms of the way the model has worked. However, we'd already put in place certain pieces of the puzzle using technology, and that was quite exciting to suddenly have to be forced to move this forward. We'd already started Sportstec, as in the organization that works more broadly than just in Calixburg, started creating videos and short videos and almost coaching tips and little lesson plans for teachers to implement. And so those are rapidly adjusted to be used at home. And so what we did is we basically, through database of, luckily there is enough connectivity to send these out and sort of try to get souls active in that way and still connected to the sport to life themes. We then built out a program called Wellness to Life, which was essentially using the same themes, but now to explain a lot more detail around health messaging and COVID-19 and staying safe during this period. So it was a common vocabulary that the children were receiving, so they could follow and understand. I mean, because this is quite overwhelming, for kids in terms of, suddenly we're not allowed to go outside and play. We can't, visit our friends. We're not going to school. So much was changing. So we try to use that as a mechanism to communicate to the children. We then also pivoted and expanded a bit more on the learning at home strategy from the literacy perspective. And Curious Learning had already built out, sort of 12-week text message campaigns that just reinforced the learning of the app. So we could now use that as well. So you were getting tips about how to stay active and how it relates to staying healthy during the coronavirus lockdown. But then we're also getting tips on, well, here's an educational bit of content, and here's a little challenge, and it was far more, I guess, communicative with the older kids, where it was a bit more feedback. Whereas with the younger kids, it was more about communicating to their parents and saying, over dinner, talk about letters that, a word that start with the letter N, and comparing it to the level in Feed the Monster, just so there was an engagement around the content that these kids could hopefully be using at home. So that was the sort of first 3-month period. Subsequently, now that schools have opened, and that's only in the last sort of 3 to 4 weeks that schools have started opening again. We've set up what's called active zones at the schools. So these are sort of COVID-19 protocol compliance spaces at the school that then allow kids to be active, allow the educators to learn about how to be active while still being compliant, as opposed to 22 kids on the field and just throw them a football and let them play for half an hour. So we started to obviously try and make sure that the educators knew how to keep kids physically active but safe as well. You mentioned sustainability and funding, and also touched on social business. We'd already started on the journey of making sure that the programming at Homeground was essentially supported by a social business model in the community. So the model itself, the idea was that it's run and facilitated by the community. It's essentially a hospitality model / training venue type of, because we've got these spaces that are very amazing to use, and then that supports the program as well. The challenge there is that involved people coming into the space, which obviously shut down this year. So suddenly, that whole strategy around making sure that the project was not dependent on outside sort of donation / charity type funding also kind of fell apart. So, to answer your question directly, it's been on us for the last, sort of 6 months to make sure that we keep the doors open, the lights on. But that's a privilege to have that responsibility, because, we'll come out on the other side of this, and there'll be, incredible learnings out of how we managed to do that. Yeah.
I just had a follow-up question, maybe for you, Sarah. And before I forget, everything you said about curious learning and their methodology, we should also stress that it's available in 30, 40 languages or more.
Yeah.
And basically, any sports for development organization can decide to plug in this solution as an add-on to the physical activity programs. That could be also nice to benefit from your experience.
Absolutely. I mean, the curious learning technology is freely available. It's free. It doesn't have any adverts. It's really an amazing tool that they have developed, and I could just recommend to any sports organization to just go have a look, check it out, and you can start using it tomorrow, basically, because it's very natural and self-explanatory. But I just wanted to add something on to what Creesen said, about this pandemic. I think what happened is that the project really reaped the benefits of the investment that we had done into people and technology the months before. Mm-hmm. Because we had already put the structures in place and the tools in place for people to be empowered and functional on the ground. For the tablets, we had WhatsApp groups. We made sure that everyone knew what was going on. We were combating, all these very strange rumors that were going around about COVID and all of that. So we had the network in place, mm-hmm. and we only really realized the value of that network when we couldn't go there anymore. And I think that was a huge lesson. And I think that is a huge lesson also coming from a national or international organization's perspective, is that you can have the most amazing methodology and the most, you can have all the resources in the world, but when the pandemic hits and you can't go and get to the end user, basically, then you really need to have empowered grassroots, because if you don't have that, you can't fulfill your goals, you can't reach your targets. So this is why, for us, it's so great to see, although this was a super challenging and still is a challenging time, is that our team on the ground, managed very well, and they really tried their best to keep things going as much as possible.
Coming back briefly on the curious learning solution and digital learning opportunities, how do you deal with this apparent conflict between getting kids active and fighting sedentarism? Yes. And it's a passion of mine. And on the other side, allowing for screens to be used and leveraged, because there's all these talks about e-games, e-sport, and whether it's in opposition and conflict to actually physically being active. Have you found the perfect mix? Do you place some sort of conditions for kids to access the pitch and the ball, not until they have used the apps and gone through some steps and learning steps?
Yeah, I think I will start saying something, but then I think Creesen should definitely finish that, because I had the same question. Like the first time I came to Philippsburg, I was like, why are you giving kids tablets like in the middle of nowhere? What are they going to do with this? Like, I didn't get it, because it seemed strange to me. But to be honest, I mean, when you think about kids, like what do they want to do? They want to move and play with their friends, and they will be on phones or devices eventually. So and even in those rural communities, even you may not have a book at home, but you will definitely have a smartphone at home, because this is a device that the whole family can use for many, many reasons. And if it's already there and available, why not use it, to support kids in their education and as a communication device? And I think we've all learned over the last months that yes, too much technology is damaging, but it can be an amazing tool and an amazing thing to communicate and help us. So it's all about how you use it, and to your point, how much you use it. So yeah, maybe Creesen, you want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. That's a great answer, really. I'll start by saying, Philippe, I firmly believe that sport and technology are essentially value neutral. They're tools. How you use them is what will determine whether they can be used for what we define as good or bad, or from whatever our values perspective is. So there's a long list of how sport is probably not the best thing for many communities. When you talk about substance abuse and hooliganism, there's lists of stuff that sport itself can create a context for social ills, let alone not necessarily sport for development and social good. And the same with tech. Technology isn't going to save humanity necessarily, but what it can do is offer us an incredible tool to tackle some of our great challenges of this generation. And luckily, we are operating in a rural environment. Okay, so we don't face the same challenges of a highly urbanized apartment living or a sort of slum / township living where confined spaces, too many people, and safety issues. Our kids are walking anywhere between 2 and 14 kilometers a day to and from school. So they're walking that distance just to use the devices, right? So we're not doing, so that sedentary aspect of that is more relevant in other contexts don't affect Sportstec Homeground the same way. By the same token, we focus heavily on enabling household devices to become tools for learning, which means they're not dedicated devices for that child. There's only a limited amount of time that the child can access it in order to do their learning. So it's quite focused, even though it's gamified learning, it's quite focused on that. This is also not an environment where you have like ubiquitous Wi-Fi, so you're not streaming random videos that may not have any educational value. So there's a combination of things. How you design the way in which you use technology, the way you use sport is important, but also the environment in which you're using it will offer different challenges, different opportunities. Our challenges are around getting enough electricity to make sure all the devices are charged on time, and getting connectivity at the right time so that we can download updates and get the research data back, to our servers, things like that. So our challenges are different, but I do agree that this is something that is always important to consider in the programmatic development of whatever you may do in this space.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're getting close to the conclusion. Time is running. I know we can't take every question, but I encourage some of our listeners to get back to you, Sarah or Creesen. You're focusing on literacy essentially, but interestingly today we're talking about general literacy, but also digital literacy, which is important for these kids in the future in whatever they do. But we're talking about physical literacy as well in the sports science. So it's an interesting combination. So congratulations on the way you've pioneered that combination of different tools to transform communities and young people's lives. So I suggest we close simply by extending an invitation to anyone post-COVID to go and visit and potentially contribute to a homegrown learning center and experience that live, because I think that's been a bit of a life changer for you, Sarah.
Yeah, you could definitely say that. It's, Geluksburg means happy town or lucky town. And I think there's a reason for that name, because it has touched everyone that has gone there. And yeah, this is an open invitation for anyone who's interested to come visit, or to simply contact us if you want more information on the sports side or on the technology side, or whatever you want to know more about.
Fantastic. Creesen, any last word from South Africa?
Just thank you very much for the opportunity and the attention that your viewers have given us. I'll just support what Sarah said. So I look forward to any follow-ups.
Thank you to you too, and thank you SportWorks for hosting that fantastic talk. And I can't wait to welcome other experts in the field of sports for development. Thank you very much for all followers and listeners, and we'll meet soon again. Thank you.